Hey guys, it's Love, back with another build guide. With everyone hyped about the new Druid reworks, I wanted to make something a little different that fits more my style of build. I'm going to be taking the melee-heavy, hulking Werebear and turning him into a super fast lightning Spellbear. If you guys do enjoy the guide and would like to see more content like this, make sure to like and subscribe to the video. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get into the build. So for the first skill, we of course are going to be taking Werebear. Now this is going to be where we get a lot of the spell scaling from, and it's going to kind of put together the rest of the build and see how this is going to function here as a whole. So for starters, you're going to want to grab the 3 points here into Invigoration. This is what's going to give you your Rage on Kill. This is going to allow you to stay in the actual Werebear for a lot longer. Next up, you'll take the 1 travel point into Earnsign Heart. Then we'll grab a 1 point here in Frenzied Strikes. Again, just another travel point. 3 points into Ruthless. This is going to make your Rage decay slower, and it's going to be super key to maintaining Werebear. And then the node that makes the whole build work here, Wizened Claws. You gain additional spell damage per point of strength while in Werebear form. So we're going to be strength stacking on this character to get all of our flat spell damage, and by the time we're done, you can easily get over 100 flat spell damage to the build. After that, we're going to take a few travel points here. We're going to go into 2 points in Rip and Tear, 2 points into Army Sunderer, 1 point here, and then 1 point into Bringer of Storms. This is going to convert Maul and Rampage base physical damage over to lightning damage. And then the important note here, Crackling Assault. You cast lightning from the sky a number of times each second while rampaging. With all 5 points in here, we're getting 5 lightning strikes per second. All of that is going to be spell damage, which will be skilled by our Wizened Claws note here. Okay, so for the next skill, we're going to be running Earthquake. Earthquake is going to be our #1 damage dealer. This is what's going to allow us to one-shot a lot of those bigger rare mobs and give us most of our single target damage. For speccing this guy out, you're going to want to put your points over here into Rupture first. This will increase the damage for the initial hit of Earthquake. Next, we'll go up here to Concussion. We'll grab 3 out of the 4 points here. Again, that's going to give you more hit damage for the initial hit. And the important note here for Earthquake is Storm Rift. So Earthquake is converted into a spell and no longer scales with melee damage, and it converts a good portion of it over to lightning as well. So this will kind of synergize with our spell stacking that we're going to be doing through Werebear. After you've changed Earthquake over to a spell, you're going to want to go over here and grab the Seismic Smash node. This is going to make it so all Aftershock damage is instead going to apply to initial hit on the tree. Since we are going to be disabling the Aftershocks and only doing initial hit, this will be important for us to scale the rest of the damage. After that, we'll go ahead and grab Seismic Tide. So this makes the initial hit of Earthquake hit 3 times instead of the 1. Since we're not getting those additional Aftershocks after the initial hit, this will allow us to still have multiple hits there, since our Earthquake is going to be on a cooldown from one of the items we use. After you grab that, we can then go over and grab all the additional lightning damage from Thunderblight, and then the 1 point into Fury of the Elements. Fury of the Elements is going to cause a lightning storm every time Earthquake goes off that does spell damage, so it's giving us a little bit more oomph on there. For the remaining points, we can put 2 points into Outbreak for a little bit of extra area clear, and 3 points into Crushing Wake for that additional 60% increased damage. For the third skill on the build, we're going to be using Summon Spriggan. I know this sounds a little weird for playing a Werebear type build to also have companions going with it, but with some of the changes with the new patch for Summon Spriggan, you can get some insane buffs from having this guy in the build. So for the first points here, we're going to grab the points into Aura of Life. This is going to increase Spriggan's healing aura. We're not going to be doing the active ability for his healing, so just be for the regular aura. Next, we'll grab the 2 points into Aura of Kinship. This is going to give nearby allies additional adaptive spell damage, which is obviously what we're stacking on the build, so that's really important. And then the huge node that they added this patch is Aura of Retribution. What this does is your Spriggan's healing aura now also gives you base crit chance and crit avoidance. So for taking all 4 nodes here, you get 8% base crit and then 72% crit avoidance. That makes it super easy for this build to get to 100% crit chance and you need almost no crit avoidance on your gear. I think I have it on one slot of my gear, and I'm completely capped out. After that, to help keep your Spriggan alive, you're going to take the 5 points into the Arboreal Vitality for the 75% increased health, and then 4 points into Warding Bark, so he gets additional 400 armor and 60% Fizz Res. Now, before we get into this next skill, one of the biggest issues that this build has that I wanted to address and why this skill is so important is your sustain. Since most of the leech for Werebear is applied to melee attacks, you don't get a bunch of leech just for spell hits, and also trying to keep your Spriggan alive so you don't lose all your crit avoidance. Now, we solve that here with the next skill by running Ettera's Blessing. What this does is it casts a heal to your nearby target, and then if it's a minion, it triples that amount of healing. So the buff is typically at 100 health, and by taking some nodes here, we're going to apply some of that healing to ourselves, as well as giving us a bunch of buffs. So for the first 2 points, you're going to run over to Arden's Touch. This is going to increase minion movement speed and some like attack and cast speed. We don't really care about this node too much, mainly just travel points. The big points here in Binding Healing, this is going to be when Ettera's Blessing is cast on the Spriggan, it's also going to heal you for a portion of that heal. So it's going to give you 60% of the healing going to the Spriggan to yourself as well. Next up, you can grab the 4 points of the Soul Bond. So whenever you're getting that healing casted on your Spriggan, for 4 seconds after, you're going to get 100% increased spell damage. Next up, we'll grab the 5 points into Improved Blessing. That's going to increase the healing output of the Blessing here by 100%. Then we'll grab the point into Efflorescence, which is going to half your heal that it's applying up front, but then make the remaining half over 4 seconds. I found that a lot of the time the Spriggan was immediately getting topped off after I got a heal off, and then it would have to wait a long time before it could get another heal, which left it vulnerable. So having it like this, it seems to cover him a lot easier and make sure he's getting that second half over time until I can get the next Ettera's Blessing off. And we'll also grab the point here for regrowth. When the heal over time expires, you heal again for half of the heal amount. So again, just additional healing a couple seconds after the fact. Next up, we'll grab the 3 points into Ancestral Renewal. So when you heal a target that's already high health, you have a chance to summon a healing totem at its location, which heals nearby allies. So that'll just give us some more additional healing and help us sustain a little bit better. For the final skill, I'm running Ice Thorns. This is solely for defense. This doesn't do any kind of additional offensive capabilities at all. This is just going to help us stay alive a little bit better. So for the first nodes, you're going to take 3 travel nodes through Dagger Thorns. And then we'll grab the 2 points into Bramble Armor. This is going to allow Ice Thorns to cast on hit. So a 20% chance that when an enemy hits you, that it's going to automatically cast your Ice Thorns. This is important because we can't actually cast Ice Thorns while we're in Werebear form. So this is what allows us to use this skill. Next up, you'll grab the 4 points of the Spell Thorns. It's going to do the exact same thing as the previous node, except it's going to give us an additional 20% chance. So now we have a 40% chance on hit to cast Ice Thorns. The physical spell damage on that node doesn't matter at all. Next up, we'll grab 1 travel point here, and then we'll go into why we're taking Ice Thorns. So we'll take the point to Thorn Barrier. What this does is now when Ice Thorns is cast, it creates a Thorn Barrier for 1 second, and then before releasing grants you armor. So you get 40 armor every time Ice Thorns goes off, and then we're going to increase that armor amount by grabbing 3 points in a Bark Shield for an additional 60 armor. That's 100 armor every single time it goes off. Next up, we'll grab the 4 points into Bulb Shield. What this does is every time a cast goes off, there's a 40% chance that the Ice Thorns will be cast again. So just stacking up that armor even more. This buff can stack as many times as you can get it off during its duration. So this will just help us get a little bit more armor. For the next point, we'll go into Protector's Briar. This is going to allow us to cast Ice Thorns on our Spriggan as well, just to make it a little bit easier for him to stay alive. And then for the final point, we go to Emblem of Might. This is just going to get rid of all the mana cost for Ice Thorns. That way we don't have to worry about it taking away any of the rage while we're in Werebear. For the base Primalist passive points here, we're going to start off with putting the 8 points into Primal Strength. That's just for the 8 strength there, since every point of strength is going to give us additional flat spell damage. Next up, we'll put the 5 points into Hunter's Restoration, mainly just for that 10% increased health, as well as gives you a little bit of health every 3 seconds whenever you hit an enemy. After that, we're going to take one travel point into Natural Attunement, which is then going to give us access to the Wisdom of the Wild, which will give us 42% increased spell damage. There's not a lot of spots on the Druid Tree that's going to give us spell damage, so where we can get it, we're going to try to. For our next passive points, we're going to be putting 15 points into the Shaman Tree. This is what's going to allow us to gain access to Earthquake. So we're going to put the first 8 points over here for the Elemental Penetration. We don't really care about the attunement too much. Next, we'll put 2 points into Tempest Form. It's going to give us a tiny bit of health and the 10% chance to shock on hit. And the final 5 points for the total of 15 into Stormbringer for the 25% increased lightning damage and 25% lightning res. Next, we'll be going into the Beastmaster Tree here. We're going to take the 8 points at the very beginning into Earthsign Strength. It's going to give us more of that strength with the flat spell damage, and then also it gives you 16% less damage taken from nearby enemies. That's pretty massive for this build since most of our clear is going to be charging through with our Lightning Storm. So we're going to be hitting most of those enemies and being in melee range a lot. So this will help keep us alive a little bit better. Alrighty guys, for the final section here, we're going to put our points into the Druid Tree. We're going to start out by putting 7 points here for the increased damage, and it also gives you elemental penetration while transformed, so that's pretty massive. We'll take 1 point here just because we need an additional point to progress through the tree, and to Spirit Warden, it'll just give you a tiny bit of health. Next, we'll take the 7 points in Druidic Prowess for that 7 strength. It'll give you 8 with the extra +1 to all attributes. We're then going to take 1 point into Blessed Springs. This is simply a travel point. And then this node right here is a massive node for our build. So we're going to take 8 points into Blossoming Garden. What this does is when you directly use a spell or movement skill, it casts Ettera's Blessing for you. Since we don't have access to Ettera's Blessing while in Werebear, this is what's going to allow us to constantly proc off those heals for both yourself and the Spriggan form. Since we're always charging and we're going to be stacking cooldown on our gear, this is going to be proccing nonstop. After you grab that, we're going to grab the 5 points into Focus Wrath. This is going to give you increased damage while transformed, and the big part is that reduced Rage Decay to allow us to keep permanent uptime on Werebear. Next, we'll grab the 5 points into Bushstalker. That'll give us a little bit of extra crit chance, and then the big part here is health leached on crit. So that will apply to your spells. This is the only part of leech you can actually get on Werebear for spells. Everything else is for melee, so we definitely want to take this. After that, we're going to put the 10 points in Aspects of Might. It's going to be pretty self-explanatory. It's giving us another 10 strength, which is fantastic. It does give you a little bit of increased melee damage per strength while in bear. So that will make your melee hits actually hit fairly hard, but we don't really care about that part too much. Next up, you'll take the 10 points into Force of Nature. That's going to give you another 10 flat spell damage. Then we're going to take 1 travel point into the Woodland Beings. And then a big note here is the natural duality. So if you're limited to 1 companion, that companion's going to have more health. It's going to make you do increased damage, and it's going to give the additional armor while having an active companion. Since we only have the 1 summon Spriggan, this is going to be huge for helping keep him alive. Plus the damage doesn't hurt. After that, we'll grab the 10 points into Rageborn. This is going to give us even more crit chance and give us a rage on crit. With my build currently, I have 100% crit chance, so this is constantly giving me rage back. And then any points that you have left over, you're going to put over to Hideskin just for that increased health. Alright guys, now before we go through all the individual pieces of gear, I wanted to tackle the 2 unique items that I'm wearing in this build. So only 1 unique is required to make this build function, and that is the Boulder's Wrap. It's a 2-hander there, and the big part of the reason why we're using this is it has the 100% chance to use Earthquake after using a non-channeled movement ability, and it has a 5-second cooldown. So every time we're casting Maul, this is what's proccing our Earthquake for us, since we can't just cast that spell while in bear form. So this is what's going to give us all of our single target. Now the downside is it does convert the main part of the damage of Earthquake into fire. However, all of the added damage is still lightning, so it's still going to scale with lightning damage too. It also gives us up to 32 strength as the implicit for this item, so you want to try to get that roll as high as you can. This is absolutely required before you can start playing this build. It's a super easy drop to get though. You drop it from the Spirits of Fire timeline boss. It's a 50% chance to drop, so you'll get it really, really quick. And then it requires you to be level 76 in order to use the item. So I would probably level as like a Werebear swipe build or something until you get to this point, and then you can transfer the build over to a spell build. The next unique I was using was the Kermody's Cage, which it gives you, LE res, base strength, LE damage. It gives you a little bit of rage on kill, which can be nice for sustaining through longer echoes and werebear form. But it's absolutely not required by any means. The only way the reason why I made this item appear as a legendary is just so I could show you what stats I would use on this if I were using a rare. And if you had like a really well rolled rare, it's probably better than this unique anyways. And then that crit strike multiplier while transformed, you can grab any of the increased lightning damage or the increased spell damage while transformed mods as well. They would all be great. The rest of your gear, your prefix priority is going to be as follows. You're going to want increased cooldown recovery, strength, minion health regen, crit multiplier, crit chance, spell damage, and lightning damage. For the suffixes on your gear, you're going to want to look to get your 75% resistance cap, 100% crit avoidance, chance to shock on your amulet, since we don't get a lot of shock on this build elsewhere, hybrid health, percent health, and then flat health. Now that you know what stats we're looking for, I'll go ahead and hover over each piece of my gear slowly here for you guys. There will also be a build planner in the description down below if you want to access this. One thing to note, as far as the minion health regen, I was able to get lucky enough to get an exalted mod for it, and you only really need one exalted mod for minion health regen to be enough. And then your Spriggan shouldn't have any issues staying alive. The only thing that ever really kills my guy at around 130 corruption is Shade. Everything else, he just tanks right through it. As far as the idols, you're just looking for increased lightning damage, health where you can get it, spell damage when you're transformed, stuff like that. Alrighty guys, that is going to wrap up the video. If you would like to see me creating these builds live, you can check me out at twitch.tv/pinchinglow. And if there is a build you'd like to see me make, let me know down in the comments below. I'll catch you guys later.